You're watching Sky News. Gareth Barlow with you. I want to turn our attention to the United States because Donald Trump has defended sending hundreds of immigrants to El Salvador, despite a federal judge issuing an order temporarily barring those deportations. The president has invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, claiming that Venezuelan gangs had invaded the United States and he had new powers to remove the members of them from the country. Well, let's speak to Vanessa Neumann, the former Venezuelan special envoy to the UK and former US government advisor. It's a remarkable situation of the past couple of days, these flights taking off despite that federal judge ordering them to turn back round and then arriving in El Salvador. What do you make of what you're seeing?
Well, thank you so much for having me on again. Well, there's a lot to discuss here. I was on the phone yesterday with some of my Venezuelan friends who are also part of the Trump's maximum pressure campaign of 2019 and 2020, which I, of course, was also a part of. And they're surprised because now Trump, too, is fulfilling his campaign promise of eliminating immigration, and he has argued that the United States is being invaded. That was in his talking points on the campaign. So I was surprised that so many Venezuelans were surprised that their temporary protective status has been pulled, and their concern is that this opens up vast powers to round them all up, even people who are seeking asylum and have entered to build new lives in the United States, that this is moving so fast that how do you know who's part of the criminal gang and who isn't? Tren de Aragua, to be fair, Donald Trump is a president, and his administration prides itself on swift action. Whether you like it or not, it's swift action that circumvents bureaucratic and administrative processes. Marco Rubio did it with Petro and broke, when the Colombians reneged on their accepting repatriation flights, he closed down the consulate in 12 hours, and 12 hours after that, the Petro reversed course. So this is very much Trump and Rubio being Trump and Rubio, and this is what the American people wanted. Bukele makes, who's the president of El Salvador, looks like a friggin' hero because he's taken his little country, which has always been a nexus point for transnational criminal organizations and the source of MS-13, which is also designated another terrorist organization within the United States, which was born in U.S. prisons, but from Salvadorans. And he is priding himself on his strongman view. And he wants to privatize, not quite privatize his prisons, but make them financially self-sufficient. So the Trump administration is paying El Salvador to take these Venezuelan prisoners at a cost that's much cheaper than it would be to imprison them in the U.S. and helping Bukele. And suddenly taking tiny little forgotten El Salvador and turning it into a major security nexus and security partner in the Western Hemisphere and boosting up Bukele's views. Venezuelans are very afraid. There's also a travel ban for Venezuelans entering the United States. And as you know, Venezuela is the biggest exodus in the world outside of wartime.
Just seeing the images we're looking at, these are reportedly of those inmates arriving in that jail in El Salvador. And everything you've just said there, Americans voting for the Trump way of action. But as you pointed out, vast powers to round people up so swiftly it's impossible maybe to tell whether they're gang members or not. Meanwhile, right, sending them to a country that is effectively doing rent-a-cell. This might be what Americans voted for in principle, but the practice about this is very different. And when the courts are putting on blocks and saying that 14-day delays need to be followed to try and ensure that there is good practice and due practice, is it not concerning what we're seeing?
Of course it's concerning. Of course it's concerning. It's concerning to the fact that, the reason why Venezuela has such a huge emigration is because it's a brutal, torturing regime. I personally have had many friends tortured to death, murdered, and death threats against me and my family. So, these things are real. There's a reason why people are fleeing. And what you really need to address is security and development in the hemisphere. You need to get rid of the push factors. That's what's pushing immigration, is the fact that you have so much drug trafficking and the drugs coming into the United States and into Europe as well. And all that criminality is what's pushing the migration. So until you resolve that, you're not going to get rid of migration. The rent-a-cell, however, I agree that it's complicated, but if you'll forgive me for a moment, the UK has also exported even its immigration processing through Rwanda. So it's controversial. This is something we see increasingly, and I saw it even dating back to 2019 and 2020 when I was special envoy. The international trend started to basically fund other governments, whether it's through USAID or UKAID or to attend to immigrants from their own country, to deal with them in these transit countries and help them with development. So that started 5 years ago, and now then the UK did it with Rwanda, and now Trump is doing it with this rent-to-sell. Now, of course, El Salvador prison system won't exactly have a great human rights record, so this is very dire.
No, I'm sure the British government would be keen to point out that actually only 2 volunteers, I think, ended up in Rwanda, despite the Conservatives trying to enact that policy, as you pointed out. It is a fascinating situation, one that we'll follow closely. I'm afraid, though, Vanessa, we are a little short of time this morning, but appreciate you joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.